for everybody in the room. We do have other city business to conduct, and we are, at 4:30, we're going to ask the council to, a motion to go into closed session to discuss with the city's litigation team regarding the lawsuits relative to Hermantown road assessments. So we look for a resolution, a motion to go into closed session. If that passes, we would go into the large conference. The council would go to the large conference room, have that closed session with the litigation team, and then following that, we'll come back here for the pre-agenda meeting, and then go through the normal agenda that we have. But because we have other business we have to conduct, and we're trying to schedule stuff with outside attorneys, we're doing the closed session at 4:30. So we'll be looking for a motion to go into closed session.
Motion for closed session. A second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We will move into the other room. We'll come back and reconvene with the business there.
Talk about yourself. Chick me. If you got a chick, not a pee.
Soon as Joe gets back to the seat here.
Pardon?
Soon as Joe's ready.
Okay. We're back in open session at the pre-agenda meeting. We're just waiting for Bill, and we're going to do a presentation on the financial audit of the year 2025. Just hang on 1 second. So Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you for the presentation.
Okay, Chris from CLA out of the Twin Cities is here to present an overview of our 2025 financials. The full audit will be available either late this week or next week on our website. And any questions, feel free to ask Chris, but thanks Chris for making the trip from the cities.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Kevin. Once again, my name is Chris Novak. I'm a principal with CLA. I've been working with the city now for a few years on your financial statement audit. I just want to thank the council for allowing me a little bit of time here to present the preliminary of the draft results for the December 31st, 2025 audit. As Kevin mentioned, we're working on finalizing the audit at this point and should be available either late this week or very early next week. So, well within the timelines and the deadlines of reporting from the state auditor's office here in Minnesota. We want to go, there we go. So we'll go through just a real brief agenda here. So what we have is we'll just introduce you to some of our senior members of the engagement team for the city's audit. We'll go through the audit results. We have some required communications that we have to provide you as your external auditor. We have several slides on some financial results and then some what we call emerging issues at the very end, which is really just an updates to the governmental accounting standards that the city follows for your financial reporting. Well, if we go to the next slide, so really just a brief introduction of the engagement team. From myself, Grace, and Frost that are included on here, we're basically been the three main people you've been working with now for a few years. So really no change on kind of the senior side of the engagement team here. So we have a lot of experience working with the city. When it comes to the actual audit results, the city is going to be receiving an unmodified or clean audit opinion on your financial statements. That's the opinion you want to see within your financial statements. So unmodified, that's the highest level of assurance that we can provide. That doesn't matter if you're a government, nonprofit, for-profit, publicly traded. Unmodified is the opinion you want to see in your financial statements, and that's what the city is going to receive. We also do look at your internal controls as part of your financial statement audit process. Our responsibility is not to provide an opinion on your control processes, but to let you know if we identify deficiencies as we work through our audit work. This year we do have one item in there that we're going to include as material weakness just related to financial reporting, which means the city is reliant on us as your auditors to help prepare the financial statements that you get at the end of the audit. So with the increasing complexities within governmental accounting, it becomes more and more strenuous for local governments to try to prepare that 150-page documents on an annual basis. So really, it's more of a, say, a note disclosure that we're helping the city with preparing their financial statements on an annual basis. We also are required to look at Minnesota Legal Compliance Guide for municipalities in Minnesota. That's a legal compliance guide that the Office of the State Auditor issues publicly or professionally every single year. It includes 7 different sections from conflicts of interest to cash and investments, claims and disbursements, contract bidding, tax and financing. There's 7 different sections we look at. And very happy to report there was no exceptions identified in our test work regarding legal compliance this year. So very positive on that. The next slide as far as required communications. This is essentially a form letter that the entire council will receive once we issue the formal audit here. And really what it is, it's a reminder that an audit provides reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance as to the results within your financial statements. Absolute assurance means we audited 100% of the transactions and activities of the local government. That's just not possible due to time constraints and how auditing works. So our opinion basically is providing reasonable assurance as to the results of your financial statements. We'd let you know if there were any significant estimates that are what we consider a high degree of uncertainty. There's only one really that is out there, and that's really related to the city's post-employment benefit liability. That's a very common liability that we have in Minnesota, but we consider that a high degree of uncertainty because the city technically has the ability to control some of the inputs that go into that with the actuary. Where your other liabilities, like your pension liability and some of those are controlled more at a statewide level. So that's the only one that we really have out there. No concerns with that calculations, or the city uses an actuary for that. We just have to let you know that estimate's out there. We'd also let you know if we had any incorrect or what we call past adjustments. We didn't have any. We have to let you know if we have any corrected misstatements or audit adjustments. We didn't have any. So that means all the information we got from Kevin and Dana and the rest of the team here at the city that we work with was in really good shape, and we were audited as we planned and how we expected. We also need to let you know if we have any difficulties or disagreements in performing the audit, and obviously that's a no news is good news situation. If we had something that rose to the level of a disagreement in performing the audit or a difficulty, we'd let you know about it before a public meeting. So no news is good news on that one. So on the next several slides here, we have some financial results for the city. This first one is really looking at your general fund financial results. A couple of items we just wanted to point out on here. So revenues, they were about $1.4 million over budget this year. Really, that's a combination of a couple of things. Property taxes were over budget this year. Licensing permits were also over budget by about $280,000. Intergovernmental revenues were over budget by about $360,000. And investment income was over budget as well by about $330,000. So really, the conservative nature of how the city typically budgets some of those more volatile revenues, whether it's interest or licensing permits, really coming in over budget is probably what you'd expect, just given the city's nature and how you typically budget for those. Looking at the expenditure side of the general fund now, the general fund actually came in under budget by about $66,000. So when you think about the budget for the entire general fund, you got within $66,000 of that. So that's very, very good. And really the biggest piece of that was just some additional capital outlay spending this year in the general fund. There was some of the land purchases and things like that that just weren't necessarily part of the original budget, or just some of the professional fees that go along with that. So overall, when you think about it, you're within $66,000 on your budget, so very good there. And at the end of the day, between the revenues being over budget, essentially your expenditures were on budget, and then your budgeted transfers out, you were able to add about $360,000 in fund balance to the general fund. Looking at the next slide, this is looking at your months of reserve that you have in the general fund, and this is focused on end of the year general fund, unassigned fund balance or unrestricted fund balance compared to what you have budgeted for fiscal year 26. So it's kind of looking forward, saying how much do you have in reserves at the end of the year based on next year's budget. You have just over 10 months of reserves in your general fund. So very healthy. The state auditor's office typically recommends a minimum of 6 months, with the idea that your tax settlements, the largest piece that come into your general fund, are typically, you don't get your first settlement until right at the end of June. That's when that first settlement comes in, so that's where that idea of at least 6 months of reserves in your general funds a good starting basis for most cities in Minnesota. This next slide, looking at the general fund financial results in a little bit more detail. So this is continuing to focus on the general fund, just in the revenues. Couple of things I just wanted to really point out on here. So while your general fund revenues are increasing in total, this year they were up about $824,000 compared to the prior year. What we like to look at in this when we start to look at cities and compare cities is the proportionality of the major revenue sources changing significantly from year to year. And really the big thing to look at on that is for the last 3 years now, that dark blue piece at the very bottom, your property tax levy for the general fund, has pretty much stayed consistent right at about 81% of your general fund revenue. So you're staying very consistent in there for that piece of that. From there, you get a little bit of fluctuation in there. Intergovernmental revenues can really be a swing just based on grant dollars and grant activity for the city. This year, there was some additional intergovernmental revenue for police aid and things like that this year. So that was about an extra $120,000 in intergovernmental revenues that hit the general fund this year. But outside of that, your charges for services and licensing permits, all of those are staying very consistent. So really just consistency. So even though if you want to say your pie is growing, the pieces of the pie are staying for the most part very consistent from year to year, which is very good to see. On this next slide, we're looking at that kind of same type of a breakdown, but looking at the expenditure side of the general fund. And here's where we like to look and see, okay, how are we adjusting anything in that same idea, the proportionality of how we're spending our dollars in the general fund. And really, a couple of things in here are kind of going a little bit different this year, but really it's some one-time spending. So there was additional capital outlay this year. That's that gray bar at the very top. That increased from about 2% to 14% in your general fund. But I know the city went through some significant land acquisitions through the general fund and those types of things. So that's really not something that happens every single year in the general fund. So that was a big piece of that. Last year, your capital outlay in the general fund was only a little over $200,000. This year was about $1.3 million. So that's really the biggest piece driving some of those pieces in here as far as public safety dropped because of that, because now it's down to 54 instead of 60%. Next year, assuming there's no other large capital purchases in the general fund, I expect it to go probably right back up into that 60% range there. So nothing really concerning in here, just given the nature of schools one-time cost with the capital allocation. This next slide is looking at the results of the water utility fund. Big things to note on here. So operating revenues this year increased about 18% from the prior year. That was a combination of increase in usage as well as an increase in rates. So looking at how do we provide these services, and a lot of times it comes from both sides. Your increase in usage is a lot of times going to be increases in development in the city. For the most part, most cities in the prior year seen their actual kind of year-over-year household use of water staying consistent or drop a little bit just from conservation efforts, how much watering goes on, that type of stuff when it's a wet summer. So usage increase, that's usually a better result of actual development going on in the city as well. Your operating expenses also increased pretty significantly this year. It was up about 30% from the prior year. Biggest driver in there is going to be your purchased water costs. That was up about $300,000 from the prior year. And then also some additional supplies and maintenance this year of another $200,000 as well. So a couple of big things in there that went in there. So really, purchased water, that's one of the big things I like to just caution all cities that I work with when they have to purchase water and they're not pumping themselves is try to make sure you're mirroring your increases in your usage or your fees close to what your purchase costs are going to be. So if they increase their rates by 5%, you should be passing on those rates as well. So you don't get behind in those and have to look at significant increases in the future. We do see that occasionally as well. And at the end of the year, the water fund had about $6.7 million in cash and investments at the end of the year. And on an annual basis, the water fund has typically right around $2.4 to $2.5 million in expenses. So you have a really healthy reserve in the water fund to be able to fund some of the activities and the development that does go on in the city. Next slide, looking at the sewer fund, really in here, operating revenues stayed pretty consistent from year to year. It was up just under, you know, a 0.5%, about 0.3%. That was really a small increase in the rates this year was really a big driver in that. Outside of that, usage stayed pretty consistent year over year. Your operating expenses actually decreased about 8.5% or 8.6% this year. Really, that's a combination of personnel costs were down this year as well as supplies and maintenance costs were down this year. So, and you know, when I say personnel costs, unfortunately with the sewer and water funds that are full accrual accounting, so when there's changes in your pension expense through your net pension liability, those do reflect that. So it's not just because I say personnel costs went down, that doesn't necessarily mean actual wages went down at all. So some of those full accrual liabilities get reflected in there as well. And at the end of the year, you have about $8.9 million in cash and investments in the sewer fund on an annual budget of typically right around 1.7, 1.8. So also very healthy in your sewer fund as well. The next slide, looking at your just general obligation bonds of the city. So you're just over $50 million in general obligation bonds for the city. That's only reflecting debt that was officially issued as of December 31st of 25. So just wanted to keep that in mind. And as you can see, there was a kind of a big jump in between 23 and 24 as the city issued bonds in accordance with your sales tax referendum that the city passed as well for some of the things going on in town here. So just wanted to kind of provide that just a 5-year look at where your long-term debt has been. On the next slide, this is really looking at all of the other types of liabilities, long-term liabilities that the city has. So this is that orange one at the very top, that's your net pension liability. The city participates in the in PARA. So what this is basically showing is your proportionate share of the overall total pension or the net pension liability of PARA at the statewide level. So unfortunately, that liability is outside of your control. If you wanted to pay off your liability, you couldn't even if you wanted to. So your only requirement is you make your statutorily required contribution on employees' wages every pay period, and that's all you can really do. So after that, you're at the mercy of the plan itself. Outside of that, your other post-employment benefit liability this year, you can see that did take a drop. As I mentioned, that is valued based on an actuary, actually looking at historical information there, life expectancy, all of that type of stuff that goes into your post-employment benefits. Then we also have small liabilities out there for compensated absences, so that's accrued vacation, sick, comp time, those types of liabilities, and then also a small lease payable liability as well. So really just gives you a 5-year kind of trend of what's going through your other long-term liabilities in the city. On the next slide, really just a reminder that financial statements and all the required forms are required to be submitted to the state auditor's office by June 30th of this year, which should not be a problem at all. As I mentioned, the final report should be available later this week or early next week at the latest. So. Any questions on the financial results? Otherwise, the last slide is really just updating you on some of the upcoming governmental accounting standards.
I had a question on that water cost up 30%. Was it just the raw cost we got from the city of Duluth, or was our water usage up?
Combination. So water usage was up, plus your actual the rates from the city increased as well. So combination of both. So again, more usage from the city residents, so that's going to cause more purchase water from the city of Duluth, but they also have a rate increase.
And then this might be more for John Mulder, but more of a clarification and remembering from the land acquisitions that were spoken about, that was Mary Murphy property and the Johnson Road property.
And there's 2 on Johnson.
One on Johnson Road and the Mary Murphy property. That was all in 25.
Yes.
And the Zierden property, wasn't it?
Zierden property was not in 2025. At least, if not before that. I don't remember the time. It was right at the, I think it was at the beginning of 24. I feel that these calendars were together at some point in time, but I believe that we closed up in January of 24 on the property.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sounds good. Then on this very last slide, I mentioned, we call it emerging issues. Really, this is just keeping the council informed of the governmental accounting standards board. They issue the standards that we have to follow and the city has to follow in preparation of your financial statements and all your report activities. The first one, statement number 103, which is really financial reporting model improvements is what they're calling it. It's going to be effective for the December 31st of 26 audit. Big piece in here is a couple of different things. So The management discussion analysis, so that's the very front section of your financial statements. It gives the readers a narrative of why things increased or decreased and what happened in the city from a year-to-year basis. With statement number 103, we're basically going to take the version that you know that you see today, toss it out, and we're going to rewrite it in accordance with 103. So they want more policy-driven narrative in there. What are we doing as governance and leadership of the city that's driving some of these increases and decreases in our activities for the year? So should be a good one. It's just a little bit more work in that first year to get it written.
For example, a new thing might, if that was in place, we might have very well said that because of some economic development and housing stuff, we purchased the land, the idea of trying to consolidate land for a housing project. Or a policy decision about historical preservation and our parks is why we bought an area Murphy property.
Yep, so that's the type of narrative that's going to start getting introduced into the management discussion analysis. So in the long term, it is going to be beneficial for the readers. It's just going to be some additional legwork at first year. With that, the statement of net positions for your enterprise funds, so water, sewer, stormwater, streets and lights. The GASB board is introducing a new concept to your enterprise funds called non-capital subsidies. So that's essentially revenues coming into those enterprise funds that are essentially keeping user rates lower than what they should be to essentially be cost neutral. The easiest example of that, just to help put your minds around that, is some cities we work with, they actually have to levy for water or sewer in their city on top of user rates.
We do not do that here in Hermantown, and have never done that in 15 years.
Yes.
Just so everybody knows, because we have a nice crowd here.
Yep, exactly. So the city doesn't, that's the easiest example for the council to kind of get your head around. So the idea behind that is that when you have to levy for a service like that, it's not the users that are paying for it, it's now the entire population of that city. So that's why they consider it a non-capital subsidy. Some grants are going to be considered that. There's just going to be a few different things in there. Really, that's going to be working with Kevin and Dana to really go through everything with a fine-tooth comb again and say, is there anything that really needs to get broken out separately there? So that's a big one. And then the other one, the budgetary comparison schedules. So like the general fund, those ones now, there's going to be some additional narrative that we have to include after those schedules for the budgetary comparison schedules that provide narrative as to why things were either over budget or under budget. So not just a line item that says, you know, administration was over budget by $50,000. Now they're going to want to have some narrative as to why it was over budget. Was it personnel wages? What was it? There's also
Good example is for the past couple of years, our police wages have been over budget. And because we've been contracting the services from other entities that have then reimbursed us. The problem is, the reimbursement doesn't show up as an expense, it shows up as a revenue. So you look at the expense line, we're over budget. How can that be? Well, because we had revenue that doesn't show up on that expense line.
Yep, exactly. The city's not allowed to net those revenues and expenses in one line item, so.
But that's just a real world example that we've had several years. And Jim always gets upset. My budget's over, my budget's looking bad. No, your budget's right, we just don't show the revenue there.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely some changes coming to the financial statements for next year, but it's something that, the next part is June 30 year end, so all of our schools that we work with, they have to implement that standard first, so there's going to be some real live examples out there for the city to help draw some, at least examples for narratives and things like that. Just what are other local governments doing? So that should help with that one. Statement number 104, that's also going to be applicable for December 31st of 26. The big impact to that one for the city is under statement number 104, now they want local governments to actually disclose in their financial statements if they're actively trying to sell any significant capital assets. Doesn't happen very often, but occasionally we have a city or a county we work with where they purchased a new plot of land for maybe a new government center, new public works, and they're actively going to try to sell the old one because they just don't need the land anymore. So now we have to disclose that in the notes. Basically, it's a sentence or two that says they're trying to sell buildings valued at this dollar amount, and here's what their accumulated depreciation is. It's a pretty simple one, just something new they want us to add.
Real world example in my career is I've worked with organizations where we sold nursing homes in county government. We sold a nursing home. In one case, we sold the paramedic operation, and we sold the garage that the ambulances will be hosted. So we got rid of that asset and moved that onto the private sector.
So there's just a quick note disclosure on that one. So that's it for the December 31st, 26 audit. For December 31st of 27, as of right now, there's only one standard that's out there, and it should be a pretty easy one. So fingers crossed, knock on wood, whatever you want to do. Hopefully they don't issue any more that's going to be applicable. Really, statement 105 related to subsequent events, all that's doing is providing clarification as to truly what is considered a reportable subsequent event. Right now, the standards that we follow are kind of vague, and there's a lot of interpretation out there. Like, for example, right now, if a city issues refunding debt, is that considered a subsequent event because you really didn't add new debt, you just swapped debt that you have? Well, under statement 105, it's truly going to give more clarification as to, yes, it should be, or no, it won't be a subsequent event. So just more clarification on that. And then there's also going to be a new note disclosure for subsequent events, regardless of whether you have one or not, that says, as part of the audit, subsequent events were evaluated through a specific date. Typically, it's going to correspond with the opening date of your financial statements, but they now want to include a specific sentence that says that. So, very easy one. It's not really going to change any extra work for the city, just more adding another small disclosure to the financial statements. So that really kind of takes you through what the GASB board has been up to, as well as some of the financial results for the city. Are there any other questions from any members of the council? Thank you very much.
Thank you to our finance department, particularly Kevin and Dana, for all the work they do to make sure that we don't have any misstatements and or errors and things like that. So appreciate the work, Kevin and Dana. We used to have New Year's Eve's party in May. We would celebrate the fact that we closed out the year, and we would have potlucks and all fun party hats and everything, but we didn't do that this year. Okay, going on to the consent agenda, under motions, we have a liquor license for Hermantown Tavern. This is new ownership of what is normally in the past has been called the Fosters. And again, just for your information, is that if this is approved, that would take effect June 1st. And because typically liquor licenses start on July 1st, we are giving them a 13-month lease, or not lease, but a license. So it would be from June 1 through June 30th of next year. And then likely you will not see it on your agenda in June. You will see all the other liquor licenses. All right, then consent agenda. You have the minutes of May 4th, and then the accounts payable from May 1st to May 15th. Then under resolutions, the first one is accepting the scoping document for the AUAR. As you recall, you restarted the AUAR process for the data center project. There was a 30-day comment period where the public was allowed to make comment and input on the items that should be reviewed in the AUAR. That's what the scoping document does. The scoping document doesn't necessarily answer all of the questions that are related to the environmental issues, but it provides, here's the scope of things that we're going to review. And so, Eric, I'm going to turn that over to you, and you can start, and then probably you invite us to us.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Mulder. So yes, I'm going to start a little bit, just give some background, where we've been, what kind of comments we received that way. At that point, I'd like to turn it over to Ron Intertech, who acted as the city's consultant in the review of this document as well. And then finally, to Representative Kimberly Thorne, who just gave a brief update as to the document specifically that way. So, as I mentioned, we've been working as a city with Kimberly Thorne to prepare this alternate urban area-wide review, otherwise known as the AUAR, on these properties in Section 31. So essentially, there's several steps associated with the AUAR process. with the public comment period for this basically first step, the scoping document, being completed on April 30th of 2026. So all told, there were 5 comments received, or basically 5 sets of comments from governmental agencies, as well as 235 comments received by the public. So basically all those comments were brought in by the city. They in turn were basically passed on to both Braun Intertech as well as Kimley Horn. What Kimley Horn then did was group these comments from the public essentially into common themes associated basically how these comments were really addressing or looking at. So let's briefly touch on what these themes were. And then in my actual report during the full session, I'll actually break down what specifically was in each one of these basically themes that way. So we had environmental impacts, water resources and wildlife, noise impacts, cultural resources, land use, transparency, public engagement and process concerns, broader social, technological, and ethical topics, economic impacts and community benefits, comments proposing alternatives, energy demand and grid impacts, sustainability and resource availability, and finally expressions of either support or opposition associated with it. So as I mentioned, these were basically the common themes that were seen during these public comments of the 235 people who expressed those. So the next step in the process is the actual acceptance of this scoping document, and then will be the ordering of the preparation of the draft AUAR document and mitigation plan. So there's obviously some information from the scoping document that can be used towards that draft AUAR. And as part of that AUAR process, there will be an additional 30-day public comment associated with that. We anticipate this process running through basically June-July period that way. And ultimately, the final AUAR would come before the City Council sometime in the early fall of 2026. So at this point, I'd like to ask Travis Fristed from Braun Intertech just to kind of give some brief bullet points, really describing the nature of a scoping document, what its purposes is, and then to briefly touch on how this compares an AUAR to an EIS document.
Thank you, Eric. Travis Fristed with Braun Intertech. I've been working with city staff the last several months on the scoping document and advising them on the responsible government unit, or RGU, responsibilities the city has in processing the application. So tonight, Eric asked me to briefly speak on the AUAR process, the current status, and potential next step. One question that we've seen in these comments is, what is a scoping document? Eric, some of these items, it is used for EIS and AUARs that are large specific projects. It identifies the resources and what specific environmental items and project components that need more in-depth environmental review. This specific information is then provided in the future draft AUAR and mitigation plan. And then differences between EIS scoping and AUAR scoping. The biggest difference is AUAR has a study area, not a large specific project, but a study area for phase development of light industrial, residential, and/or housing, and it's based on a conceptual plan. The EIS, on the contrary, is for a specific project that meets mandatory requirements. An example of that would be possibly a large mining project, heavy industrial use, might use EIS scoping, but for this type of project, large specific AUAR scoping can be used, or EIS can be used. The resolution that's in the packet today is for finalizing the final for review. If that is passed, that would initiate the next step, which is the draft AUAR and mitigation plan.
And Travis, if you could just briefly touch on as well, there's been some questions regarding the extension of sanitary sewer to this area as well, and whether or not that should be basically looked at in this scoping document, in the AUAR document.
So there is connected or phased actions, which are reviewed as part of the document. Those utility extensions have been deemed to be a non-connected or phased action, and additional information will be provided in the draft AUAR.
If there's maybe any quick questions from council, otherwise I ask Taylor Fungi to step up as well from Kimmy Warren.
I've got a question for you. We've heard a lot of conversation about whether this project is heavy industrial or not. And you just mentioned that it was not. So in other words, could you define the difference between heavy industrial and the project that we have in front of us?
Sure. Light industrial is generally less than 500 employees. Generally speaking, it does not have significant permits related to the operational nature of it once it's in post-construction phase. Heavy industrial is going to be the opposite of that. Generally, you could have less than 500, but you're going to have additional permits that are going to be more operationally focused.
I have one follow-up question. How do we ensure that all of these comments are considered within the drafting of the AUAR?
Yeah, great question. So all the comments were reviewed by staff in addition with the project proposer. Those comments then were reviewed for if they were substantiated or not, meaning if they were factual or not substantiated. There were some comments that did result in some revisions into the final scoping document. I believe the final scoping document is on the webpage right now, so it's also in the packet as well. And a lot of those comments then will get carried over into the draft AUR, which will have more of that detailed information, which will then lead to the development of the mitigation plan.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. My name is Layla Bundy. I'm a consultant with Kinley Warren, leading the AUAR process on behalf of the project proposer. It was a good segue to the part that I was going to mention as well. As part of putting together the final order and scoping document, we did thoroughly review all of the agency and the public comments and took into consideration the things that we could incorporate into the draft AUAR. So a couple of those new topics that we did add on behalf of the comments received. We will be discussing fire risks in relation to electrical faults and cooling systems, de-icing and other chloride reduction strategies related to snow melting, electronic waste or e-waste, more information on groundwater, springs, and surface water interaction with stormwater control systems. There will be a discussion on alternate sites, and then also probably covered in a lot of sections, but really just more data center specific information. I think there was a lot of comments just looking for more information about what a data center is, what it is not. So specifics that we were going to be incorporating will be about heat, energy use, cooling technologies, noise, lighting, other design considerations. And many of the comments also did mention things that will be covered in the draft AUAR as well. So those are kind of the new things that were added based on the comments that we received.
And then one of the other basically comments received was basically the diving deeper into details associated with the project. So this, once again, this is part of the overall process. So assuming this project continues to move forward, there will be an actual commercial industrial development permit application as well as a special use permit application. At that time, it's basically related to the stormwater design, the lighting design, site design, all those things associated with that, where you're really taking a deep dive into the details and specificities of those different systems that way. So as I mentioned, the AUAR and the scoping document, essentially a little bit higher level, but then these other type of design applications will really take that deep dive into those particular things as well.
I have one question about our noise ordinance, so I'm guessing over here. Where is we'll just take nighttime, where is the 50 decibels measured? Is it on the proposed site's property? Is it on a neighboring property? I didn't see any differentiation in there.
We would take it from the property line, the actual use.
I did a little experiment at home. I went outside with my sound machine for the kids, turned it up to 50 decibels and walked away until I couldn't hear it anymore. And it was maybe 30 feet before I couldn't hear the 50 decibels. And just to know on sound, it doesn't matter. 50 decibels is 50 decibels. You could have 1,000 air conditioners running. If the sound measure is 50, it's 50. Right? So I think it's important to note that it has to be 50 at the property line. Doesn't matter what's running.
Again, this is the scoping document, it's just part of that process where then this orders the draft of the AUAR. There's going to be a comment period for the public at that point in time, and then eventually a draft AUAR will be presented to the city council. Any other questions?
It might be a clerical issue, but we've got section 14, page 43, it says section 31 on our list of resolutions.
Councilor Peterson, we did, staff did update that.
Thank you.
It is section 31. Section 14 is the other project we're working on. We're putting in, redoing Lightning Drive with water and sewer. So, Resolution 49 is a resolution clarifying the motion to table the resolution. At the last meeting, you tabled the actions on the development and tax abatement agreement. Typically, we don't have most resolutions clarifying tabling motions. But the motion is tabled, it just sits there until such time it's put back on the agenda and brought up. But we want to clarify this just for everybody's kind of scheduling and timing, is that this resolution says that it'll be tabled until such time the AUAR is completed. Just to clarify, so it's not like it'll come up at a meeting sometime prior to that time period. We'll wait for the AUAR to be completed, and then you'll could take up that resolution again.
Can I ask a question about clarifying and clarifying?
Sure.
I've asked a lot of questions about the tax revenue generated by this. If you recall at the last meeting, I asked Todd, can you tell me the numbers that are expected to be generated? Could you find out from Ellers so I asked how much we expect to collect. Can you find out what they are expecting the valuation of the property to be at the end of the build up? How do they come up with the numbers that he gave us last time, which I think totaled around $2.5 million, based on what valuation? If we could just find that out from what they're using.
Very appreciate it, Councilor Geisler. You're talking about the valuation of the buildings themselves.
The property, yeah, after completion.
So we work with St. Louis County assessors to determine the price per square foot value.
Okay.
And then that was applied across both, so there were different values, one for the data center buildings, one for the office building, and those were applied separately. And then Ellers recommended that an inflator be placed on those price per square footages to increase over the course of the construction schedule. So that's how, working with St. Louis County, is how we came up with those valuations.
So we did consult with them.
That is common practice on how to, when you're doing these types of financial forecasts, that's how we do it.
Thank you.
Resolution 50 is authorization to purchase of a trailer in the amount of $25,920. This is part of the capital improvement program where we bought the skid steer, but we also wanted a trailer with it. Just those proposals came in separate from the skid steer, so that it's part of that project. Resolution 51 is accepting an easement from Minnesota Power on the Lightning Drive Trail, Lightning Drive improvements in the trail project. Trish or David?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. So this easement is an easement for the work associated with the Section 14 project. This easement specifically is at the intersection of Getchell and Lightning Drive. So the easement will include improvements to both Getchell, Lightning, our new trail, and the sewer that runs through there. Any questions on that?
we have a couple other easements that are being worked on for that project that will come to you in the month of June. Resolution 52 is receiving the preliminary engineering report and calling for a public hearing for improvements on Stebner Road between Morris Thomas and Maple Grove. That project is scheduled for 2027, sorry. But we were going to start that process with having a public hearing on the project, and this is receiving that preliminary engineering report. Just a note, this is part of the overall road improvement plan where we have the preliminary engineering report for those that work to be done and cost estimates. We then meet with the residents and we talk about what, how that will impact them, what we are proposing in terms of assessments and or improvements. Then we have the public hearing, and then we will, if the council approves that, we'll start the design process. Once we're in the design process, at some point in time, we'll have another public information meeting to share with the city, with the residents that are impacted. This is what the design is starting to look like. And then we go through that process, and ultimately you'll award those bids. Again, assuming if things go along the way a normal one would go, you would award those bids. The contract would be let, the work would be done in 2028, and at the end of that, you would have the assessment project. So in 2026, residents would know about any proposed assessments that may happen following construction in 2028 that would go on to the property taxes in 2029, which is typical of what we've done with our road improvement plan over the last 5 years.
And can you remind me and others how we notify the people of public hearing?
We send the public notice to all of the affected property owners, everybody along that stretch. We also have it.
Letter in the mail.
Yes, we also have it in the Hermantown Star.
But everybody gets a letter.
Yes.
Could we make an announcement for that with the Facebook group? I know we post meeting agendas and whatnot. We've had complaints in the past that we're not communicating well enough. I mean, that's a simple way if anybody's following the city that we can just post it in the group that chooses to. So I guess if anybody, we've had complaints that they, there's nothing that you can click to follow along. If there is, it's the Facebook account.
Good here.
Yeah.
So,
School schedule?
no. So just mayor and council, just a couple of project updates. Before you here, you see a map. So this map is the project area. 2 miles of Stebner Road from Morris Thomas north to Maple Grove Road. And this section of roadway was built in 3 different segments in different years, starting in 94, 99, and 2004. So in 28, the newest section will be 24 years old. This is a state aid street. That means we can use sales gas tax dollars from the state to apply to this project. That's one of the funding sources. We are planning this to be a reconditioned project, not a full reconstruction. So reconditioning means we'll do milling of the bituminous surface, some spot repair of the curb and gutter, full replacement of the sidewalk, and ADA improvements. As part of this effort, we will test the utility to see if there's any bad utilities that we need to replace. So that's kind of the scope of the project. And Joel, if you could advance the slide, please. So this next slide here, if we zoom into the bottom of this page, is just a project cost. So you can see that the top part of that is we have about 2.7 million in construction costs, and the other items are we refer to as soft costs: engineering, surveying, contingency, and administrative costs. So for a total project cost of 3.5 million. The possible funding sources for this are stormwater utility fund. There are 95 parcels across this, so if the council decides that we're gonna go through the assessment process. There's a funding source there, and then the balance would be the MnDOT state aid of 2.6 million. So a reminder, we get about $800,000 a year through our state aid account, and in 28, we would probably have to advance some of the costs here because our pot isn't that big right now, but it's allowed through the state aid. So I guess with that, is there any other questions that John or I did not cover?
Did we decide to do a separate appraisal for each one of these projects moving forward after the Hermantown Road project? I thought we had talked about that during the discussion for the initial assessment.
We have not started that process.
Councilor Law, I think also that was if we needed easement, we were doing appraisals.
I thought it was just so that we have an accurate number for each project. Different parts of the city.
Also, Councilor Law, I have a clarification. So do you want notification just on Facebook, or you want to have a website through our Hermantown site?
I think it was more so people didn't have something that they could follow.
Okay, so have
Yeah,
something
okay,
on
so-
the website?
Yeah, so people could follow the Facebook page and get updates that way.
Okay, thank you.
Resolution 53 is approving a preliminary and final plat of the Hawkline Business Park and imposing conditions on the final plat. Eric, you want to talk about this?
Yes, thanks again, Mr. Mulder. So currently, this is the Hawkline Business Park that council has been talking about for quite some time. This is a 46-acre relisted Superfund site at that northwest quadrant of Highway 53 and Lake Bypass Road. So currently, there's 4 parcels comprising this 46 acres. So what the applicant is proposing to do is essentially do some combinations and create, at the end of the day, 6 parcels associated with this 46 acres. The majority of this plat will be associated with the 38-acre parcel, which is the proposed development of a 231,000 square foot warehouse distribution facility. As part of that also includes the parking lot, as well as the 3 stormwater detention basins associated with that actual development. The second parcel created will be a 3.1 acre parcel. This will be down in that lower right-hand corner where it floods the intersection of 53 and Lake Bypass. That's a future development parcel associated with this potential project that way. There also is going to be a 3.1 acre parcel for the existing building that's currently along Highway 53. That's a scaffolding business, an existing building right there. There'll be a separate lot for that. There's going to be the last 3 parcels all have to do with right-of-way. The first one is a 0.9 acre right-of-way deeded to the city for the purposes of building a future road which will terminate a small cul-de-sac which takes access to the Lake Bypass. That future cul-de-sac provides access to that future development lot as well as the main 38-acre parcel. And then lastly, there's 2 parcels created, total of 1.7 acres, and those are going to be right-of-way deeded to St. Louis County for the Lake Bypass Road. So this gives an opportunity to clean up a little right-of-way issues associated with the Lake Bypass Road. So at the end of the day, we're taking 4 parcels and doing some recombinations and some additional splitting to create 6 parcels at the end of the day.
But 2 of the parcels become public right away? Is that my understanding?
Actually, at the end of the day, there's 3 of them. One's deeded to the city. That's for,
Okay.
yep, and then 2 of them actually go to St. Louis County.
This was approved at P&Z at the last meeting.
That's correct, the commercial industrial development permit, yes.
And can you kind of give an update upon, we're doing the parcels here, but the anticipated project and schedule of the project?
So at tomorrow night's Planning and Zoning Commission, there's going to be a wetland replacement plan associated with this development. So it's kind of the last step from that portion of environmental. And then the applicant is continuing to move forward with engineering plans associated with this. And from what we're understanding is they want to keep moving along that way. Mr. Wolf, if you wanted to share anything from a utility standpoint?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. So, as you know, as a city engineer, I'm working with the city and St. Louis County on a cooperative agreement to provide utilities and road improvements for the development. So we have determined the need to break this project up into two pieces, one being the utilities. So we're actively working on extending the water and sewer to the site that would terminate in the right-of-way that they're dedicating via this plat. That would be, we'll call that Project A, and we anticipate that to come out in probably July of this year to authorize plan and specifications and start that work later this year. Then Project B would be the surface work on LeBake Bypass and the two new city roads that will be created. And so that will be new turn lane improvements, a roundabout at the intersection of Buxted and LeBake Junction.
LeBake Bypass.
LeBake Bypass, thank you for too many LeBake roads. And that project we're planning to put together at the end of this year, let that, and then start construction, you know, probably April 27 and have everything complete by October of 27.
Remind me, right, that the wetland replacement plan comes to the city council?
Yes, it will. That is correct. That's anticipated for the June 1 meeting.
But the P&Z already issued the CIDP, which is a permitted use in that zone, that does not come to city council. So with that wetland replacement plan, they'll be ready to go. Lastly, is Resolution 54, deliver an agreement for fireworks from Flashing Thunder Fireworks. The left that is scheduled for July 18th as part of Summerfest on that Friday night. Month of July will be the weekend of July 3rd and 4th. The following week is July 11th and 12th will be the air show in Duluth and flying over Hermantown. And then the following week is Summerfest with fireworks on Friday night, among other things in Summerfest. That is the end of our business. Mayor, do you have anything to do with that?
A couple of things. Someone called and asked and kind of complained about our banners on the outside road. They say Hermantown are about at least 15 or 18 years old. We're starting to look pretty warm in weather.
We can look at that. I think there's one that is the old one, and then there's several that were put up in 2019, but I know that they've taken a beating too. We'll take a look at that.
The ones in
The marketplace.
Marketplace are looking pretty tattered.
And speaking of the marketplace, I received a complaint about all the roadside trash on Wilbur and Market Street. Bags from Walmart going across Wilbur into the Creek right away, hanging on trees, and then even some hypodermic needles across Market from very in the roadside. That's it.
John, anything?
Just looking for an update on trails, as long as we have some time here. The trail work that was started last year, and then how that'll pick up this year, and then the design work kind of around King Creek Townhomes in that area.
Okay, Mayor and Council, so we'll start with the project that's under contract with White right now. So still under winter suspension. We expect shortly after road restrictions, we'll have another kickoff meeting and work to commence probably early June. We got our final permit from the DNR to cross the creek off of just up from Getchell on that project. So that's where that one is at. The next phase of the trail project from Carlson Road up to Hermantown Road, adjacent to King Creek Town Hall. We are working with the SCH or consulting engineer on the environmental piece and the DNR on how to cross that floodplain. So we're actively working on that. And then the section 14, that's the trail from Maple Grove and Stevener through the industrial park to City Hall here. And we're anticipating, that project to go in July of this year.
Also was wondering if there's any update on the trailer park?
The real quick answer is, the court had said that we could not shut the water off. Then there was some flooding, and so then the owner asked us to shut the water off, so the water's been shut off at the trailer park. Beyond that, sure what the status is.
Yeah, we had a trial in that case, and the court issued a decision, and that decision is that the two remaining residents are now going to be evicted from the park, so it will be empty, at least from real tenants, and we will proceed from there.
But all the trailers that were supposed to be removed have not been, right?
That is correct.
For those last two occupants owner occupied, or was it rented?
They were owner occupied.
Is there relocation assistance for their trailers, or are they not booked for that?
The city has, so it got a little bit goofy because there was a formal closure process that got stopped, and then there was some litigation. But the city has worked to make sure that those residents have the access to the relocation funds that they would have gotten if they had followed a different, more formal closing process.
All right, next question was, and this is old news now, and just a question, but I gotta mention this to some people that I had gotten a flyer in the mail, like a lot of other hometown residents. I'm assuming that Green Goods is now selling recreational marijuana. Is that understood, that they have all of their state and city permitting in place?
That's my understanding.
Did we get any notification from the state that they authorize that?
I don't know if Alyssa's been notified of that or not, for sure.
Okay, can we find that out?
Yeah.
And then the discussion we've had about hearing assistance devices, if we've got any progress on that.
We've talked about that and we're working on it.
Okay. And I think that's it.
Andy?
Nothing tonight.
Brian?
Kudos to John on a complete list as always. I did have one question, Chap, for you, and now that we have some time with the development agreement. Can we look into ways of potentially tying assessed values to sale values, and if there's a drop, that Google will be responsible for covering some of that, if not all of it? Is there grounds for that?
You're speaking about this, Mayor Shea comes with a lot of the surrounding properties?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in dealing with repercussions of your actions, right? If you choose to buy on a busy street, you can't complain about the traffic, right? The people that bought over there didn't know this was happening, right? Is there a way, if it does affect their values, their investments, that we can protect them, or people can protect them in some manner?
Mayor Shea comes with the law. We could certainly look into it. We would then be setting a precedent, of course, where any future development that happened, we would then be discussing time assessed or project value implications across the board. So every decision we make, of course, is going to have future implications.
Fully understand that Google may not approve any of it, but just be curious if there are some options that we could pursue.
I can certainly have a discussion.
You know anything?
Don't know, excuse me.
I'm not going to go around to department heads unless you have something absolutely burning, but it's 6:19. We'll take a 11-minute break and be back here at 6:30.